Format of the panel, every ambassador will be given 10 minutes on the podium to present a keynote speech, and then we will go into a question and answer session followed by question and answers to the audience. I'll start with Ambassador Matthew Tula, the United States Ambassador to Iraq. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers, I see our French colleague is just arrived.
Well, we are very happy to announce that His Excellency Ambassador Bruno Obert has joined us at the panel.
Very good.
Merci, Monsieur Ambassadeur.
Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to offer my gratitude to the Iraq Energy Institute for organizing and hosting this important event. And of course, I'm pleased to see so many energy experts, both from the government and the private sector, here to exchange ideas. What I hope to accomplish with my remarks are two objectives. First, I'd like to encourage our Iraqi friends as they seek to improve the overall investment climate and the ease of doing business in the energy sector. And second, I'd like to highlight the ways in which creative U.S. diplomacy, USAID, and partnership with our private sector can serve as force multipliers in Iraq's efforts. Iraq's investment climate remains challenging for American and other international investors. Companies' ability to generate profit, of course, is a crucial factor in determining their willingness to invest. The Iraqi government must recognize that without the prospect of adequate financial returns, investors' appetite to take financial risks in capital-intensive sectors, such as energy, will be limited. So improving that business climate is critical to encouraging investment. And that's why the United States continues to support efforts to make it easier to do business in Iraq and to encourage the government to reach international standards in the areas of visas, customs, taxes, and business formation. A fundamental component of any country's business climate is the ease in which companies are able to do business. I'm concerned that Iraq is trending in the wrong direction in this regard, dropping from 168th place in the 2018 World Bank Ease of Doing Business report to 171st place in the 2019 report. The World Bank in this report identifies a number of risk factors for Iraq, including people's inability to get access to credit and the lack of an effective mechanism to resolve insolvencies. However, another key deficiency the bank identifies are the challenges people and businesses face in accessing electricity. While the bank credits the Ministry of Electricity for having established successful procedures to connect people and business to available electrical supplies, it also points to several areas where Iraq can still improve this service. According to the bank, Iraq faces several deficiencies that undermine this portion of its ease of doing business ranking. Iraq lacks an independent regulatory entity monitoring performance and the reliability of electrical supply, financial deterrence aimed at limiting power outages, and a transparent online system to communicate electricity tariffs. While many of these issues could be tied to the broader debate surrounding electrical tariff reform, Iraq can benefit by taking immediate small steps like publishing more data about the cost of electricity. Such incremental changes and publishing such data online could pay big dividends down the road. With respect to our own diplomatic efforts to encourage success in these areas, since my arrival in Baghdad earlier this summer, I've been pleased to engage extensively with Ministers Ghadban, Minister Khatib, who have been clear about their vision to modernize Iraq's energy sector and improve the electrical distribution network and to enhance natural gas capture capabilities. They understand Iraq's need to make these improvements, as well as the benefits the Iraqi people will gain by encouraging investments in these areas. For too long, of course, these opportunities have been overlooked, underappreciated, and undeveloped. The United States is pleased at the improvement Iraq has displayed, but nonetheless, we all recognize that much progress is needed. For example, as you all know, more gas is flared into Iraq's atmosphere than anywhere else in the world. This process is wasteful, inefficient, and contrary to Iraq's energy self-sufficiency. This gas must be captured, processed, and delivered as feedstock to fuel Iraq's power stations. What is now a wasted byproduct could easily become a cost-effective source of new energy to power Iraq's economy and deliver reliable electricity for Iraq's businesses and consumers. Now is the time to show the people of Iraq that the government is serious about implementing real solutions. U.S. companies are available, willing, eager to partner in this effort. Opportunities exist for electricity as well. In our view, fostering greater cooperation with Gulf neighbors, Jordan and Turkey, and with partners in Europe and the Western Hemisphere could be a strategic game changer for Iraq's reconstruction. Such cooperation could include more investment in energy infrastructure, which would improve the efficiency of Iraq's power structure. It will help Iraq to leverage its critical natural gas assets that are currently going unused and reduce the political risk inherent with shipping its oil exports through the Gulf. An Iraqi agreement to build an interconnection with Jordan, Saudi Arabia, or the Gulf Cooperation Council Interconnection Authority would be an important step towards making Iraq energy self-sufficient. Building reliability and resiliency into the electrical grid through ambitious infrastructure ties with neighbors is in Iraq's strategic interest and is central to any viable strategy to improve energy stability in Iraq. We strongly believe that improving energy stability in Iraq is a necessary precursor to expanding economic opportunities and improving the lives of the Iraqi people. So in addition to our government efforts, the U.S. government has directly supported Iraqi efforts to become more energy independent. For example, we've sent over 50 individuals and groups to the United States over the past two years to dive deeply into issues like power sector modernization, energy security, water resources management, renewable energy, and academic and industry partnerships in the oil and gas sector. In cooperation with the bank and through its Takamul project, the U.S. government funded technical assistance for the drafting of the natural gas market framework with an ambitious goal to reduce flaring to zero by 2030 and develop a wholesale gas market in Iraq. The United States is also supporting the Kurdistan regional government's plans to address challenges that affect public spending and citizens' quality of life. We assist the KRG Ministry of Electricity to enhance and save energy, control consumption, and raise revenue collection. Just finally, a word on the private sector. In addition to our government, diplomatic, and assistance efforts, our private sector shares Iraq's goal to expand and broaden the economy to benefit all Iraqis. Harnessing the innovative capabilities of American companies can be a critical component of any strategy to facilitate Iraq's reconstruction and energy resource development. American companies in the energy sector have strong leadership and technical capabilities, access to robust technological platforms, and decades of experience managing complex projects in difficult operating environments. American companies have their own concerns with Iraq's investment climate. However, their adherence to laws such as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and their vigorous compliance standards can also serve as a model for Iraqi counterparts as the government seeks to improve transparency and combat corruption. To be certain, Iraq has made progress in attracting the attention of U.S. companies. This past December, our embassy supported a visit of over 50 U.S. companies from a variety of sectors that traveled on a U.S. Chamber of Commerce business mission. The demand for U.S. products and services in all sectors has never been higher, and the Iraqi government has the opportunity to seize this to improve the climate for U.S. investment and opportunities. American companies are eager to participate in the development of Iraq's energy sector. Companies including GE Baker Hughes, Honeywell, UOP, Bechtel, ExxonMobil, Chevron, among many others, are present today. Our private sector stands ready to provide its expertise and technology in support of efforts to build a more robust Iraqi energy sector, and they're supported by the American Chamber of Commerce of Baghdad. Concluding their deals provides a positive signal for other companies interested in doing business in Iraq. So, Your Excellencies, thank you again for hosting us, and I look forward to engaging in fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Wilkes of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Ministers, Excellencies. It's a great honor to be addressing this conference, which I think of the 5 that have been held is probably the biggest and in some ways the most hopeful that has been held. And I think there is really good reason for that hope, but we have to be realistic about the challenges that are before us to turn that hope into real positive gains for the Iraqi people and for the relationship of Iraq to various countries. So I'll come on to how the UK is doing that, but when I think the title of the session is Energy Diplomacy, when I think of energy in Iraq, as I think most of us do, we think of, this is a country that's now capable of producing 5 million barrels of oil a day and has credible plans to increase that. That makes it a really big international hydrocarbons and more widely economic player. And I think conferences like this enable business, investors, analysts to take another look at the balance of positive and negative in the country. And my view, and I hope to show and share that with you now, is that the positives in the country outweigh the negatives. But we need to be honest, I think, about the two biggest challenges before us, which is, yes, this is a country that is capable of producing 5 million barrels of oil a day, which should make it a really rich country, and yet clearly, for all sorts of reasons, most of which have been touched on today, it is not really delivering. I had a visit by a very senior economist about a year ago who said, I recognize many of the problems in Iraq that I see traveling around the world in other developing economies. There's nothing here that is uniquely difficult or impossible to deal with. But if we compare the size of the GDP as a measure of the economic benefit that Iraq gets every year, largely from its hydrocarbon wealth, with the amount of oil and gas produced, then Nigeria, with all its problems, extracts 3.5 times more economic benefits than Iraq. He titled his visit report, Getting to Nigeria. Now, if we could get to Nigeria, the Iraqi people would feel a lot of benefit. They wouldn't be happy. They'd say it's still a disgrace that this country, which has had so much in the past, and which now with this level of oil production should be really one of the most prosperous countries in the world, certainly in the region, has to have ambitions to go way beyond that. But at least we can say that Iraq is at a level now where we do not have to have miraculous ending of corruption, the miraculous ending of all conflict in the country, in order to get it to a much better stage of extracting the wealth for the sake of its people from its hydrocarbons sector. And so we have been working very hard with the government of Iraq, and I'd like to congratulate Minister Louel Khatib and also the Deputy Prime Minister Tamarat Ghadban, who in the last year, and we've heard this today, against all the difficulties of the system, the political muhassa system, the bureaucracy, the corruption, all the problems with the business environment that we know and continue to work to improve with all our Iraqi partners. Nevertheless, they have started to make progress in terms of electricity production, in terms of the agricultural sector, in terms of oil and gas, and making more use of that hydrocarbon wealth. So what we want to do next year is just make sure there's increased momentum to that. So the first gap we have to close is getting more benefit out of Iraq's hydrocarbon wealth. And the government is committed to doing that and has made a start. But the second gap, and this is clear to all of us, with everybody we meet when we travel around the country, I've just had some opinion polling done which confirms it, is the Iraqi people are angry because they say the government is not delivering enough on jobs and services. So again, we have to bring the raising of the economic performance, of exploiting all the wealth that the hydrocarbon sector is producing, to improve electricity and water and health and education in the country. And again, I'd like to just say a little bit about what the UK is doing to help. I think our performance in terms of our economic, business, investment, trade relationship with Iraq has been transformed by what is known as Al-Qard al-Britani, the British loan, but is in fact a commitment by UK Export Finance to support major infrastructure projects in the country. We tried last year to allocate £1 billion worth, largely to electricity projects in the south, including to the British bits, the UK bits of both Siemens and General Electric. And we also did a small water project. The experience was so successful, and our ability to partner and manage the risks with the Iraqi government reached a level where we said we can actually commit to doing another £1 billion worth of UK export finance support projects in the country, according to the priorities of the Iraqi government, which we are agreeing now. So we're going to build on what happened last year. Those projects are all underway to do more on water, more on electricity, more in other sectors that are prioritized by the Iraqi government. And our experience in the last 2 years for British companies, this is a turning point. 10 years ago, the big oil majors came in and helped to raise the production of oil and gas in the country. Now, major international partnerships, we heard earlier from Siemens, which gave us a taste of what that entails, are now engaged in major infrastructure projects. This is really, I think, the second biggest turning point in the Iraqi economy in the last 16 years. And I'm proud to say the UK is playing a part, but there's enough room in this economy if we raise its potential for all the countries. So one of the things I do is speak very positively in these terms about, things are happening now. So now is the time to take a look at the Iraq market. I did a business roadshow in the UK earlier this year where I encouraged all British companies, including international companies with a British presence, to take another look at the Iraqi market. And I'm glad to say that the amount of interest that we have experienced, judging by contacts with our embassy, has increased. And I think that's absolutely right. And I think that should be right actually for every country that is a partner of Iraq. I should just say something finally about the second word in the title, which is diplomacy and energy diplomacy. Another success of Iraq, and I think although this delivers longer term effect, is that because of its hydrocarbon wealth, because of its great economic power, Iraq's voice in the region is returning in a way that people are listening, in a way that benefits Iraq, and which is, if you like, Iraq playing its natural role, not what it played 30 years ago as an aggressive military power threatening its neighbors, but as a major economic and hydrocarbon power saying we want now to invite international partnership to reconstruct the country. We are open to developing our relationships with our neighbors and beyond. We encourage those companies who come and see us to discuss with us priorities that can work for both sides. And I think that is happening now. So I think Iraqi diplomacy is actually supporting its economy in general. And I think the challenge for us, and I'll finish on this now, is as we get the infrastructure projects going, particularly electricity, we have to move to diversification, the non-oil sectors, including the industrial sector. And I, for one, am encouraging companies to come who have cutting-edge technology, who've worked in more difficult business environments, and I'm thinking of the Nigerias and the Pakistans and the Central Asian states. That's the sort of thing that I think, if they've succeeded there, they can come and handle the sort of risks and challenges we have here. And I think that should produce for the government of Iraq in the next couple of years a lot of new avenues to diversify the economy. So for me, the positives outweigh the negatives, but we do have to, as Matt pointed out, the business environment is still nowhere near where it should be. But as the Prime Minister said to me when I raised this with him some time ago, look, the way we get this right is by doing some of these projects. We will streamline and prioritize through government, and I know there are further measures in the pipeline to increase that. Then we show the Iraqi people how these private sector partnerships work and deliver. That'll change the culture, that'll change the way our system operates, and things will accelerate as they go. So last year we saw some progress. I'm confident there'll be more next year. Let's try and keep that momentum increasing, and I think we're going to see some big results in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. That was very insightful. Now we go to Ambassador Hansi Escobar, a Spanish ambassador to Iraq.
Thank you, yes, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me, yes, sir. Thank you, Minister. Highly honored to be here talking in front of you. And, I want to try to go through what Spain is doing right now. To my regret, I will have to say, even though it's a very important thing, probably our most important contribution to Iraq is still our military support in the campaign against Daesh, even though Daesh is gone. When Daesh conquered the north of Iraq in 2014, Spain was one of the first countries to answer the call of the government of Iraq. We became a very important member of the coalition. We're probably the second, third country with more troops here. We have over 500 soldiers altogether in Iraq. Most of them are in the base of Besmaya, which is under the leadership of a Spanish general, where we're training about 2,000 soldiers in every turn or every period, and where practically Spain has, in the last 4 years, trained over 35,000 soldiers, Iraqi soldiers over here. We have also an important special force team here with over 70 soldiers, which are not only trained in the CTS, but also they have been able to build the special forces of the Baghdad Operational Center and the police SWAT from Ramadi, and they're working very hard with them to fight the remnants of Daesh. We have also an helicopter unit of 6 helicopters, which is supporting the coalition and the transfer coalition, doing practically 30% of the flights that are doing nowadays in Iraq within the coalition. And altogether, its mission is cost around $100 million a year. By contrast, and I have to say that, even though I will try to see that as John said, things are getting better, and little by little, Spanish companies are showing interest to come to Baghdad. As I said, our contribution to the stabilization efforts have been weak and very punctual, mainly support to the UN agencies and humanitarian aid. This is due mainly to the Spanish crisis in 2008. You know that until that time, Spain was on the brink to reach the 0.7% of the GDP sent for aid programs under the government of Zapatero. Unfortunately, the crisis came, and the budget of our aid agency dropped 80%, and we have not recovered yet, unfortunately, from that crisis. Unfortunately, also, as I said, the presence of Spanish companies in Iraq has been also weak. I have to admit it. Mainly, there are some factors, but the most important factor was the bad experience that we had quite a few small and medium enterprises who came to Baghdad from 2010 to 2014. They had some projects, mainly with the government, and due to the dual crisis that Iraq suffered in 2014, the drop on oil crisis and the arrival of Daesh, well, they didn't get paid. And, unfortunately, the crisis, the war, and, the bad experience of these companies made Iraq like something no one wanted to talk about it, and even not even to think to come. Well, one of my jobs as I came here was to try to change that. In that case, the key question to me, and I'm very proud, John was just saying the other day that he's been here 2 years, hopeful years, and it's true. We are lucky, ambassadors have been here in a time where Iraq has recovered, has gone up, and the key question to me has been the normalization of Baghdad. To our foreign guests, I will tell them that this is probably the most important development in the last year. The normalization, people going out, businesses are opening, the city has, all these T-walls have disappeared. And if you have a look at Baghdad now, it's, it could be a much safer town than any of the ones you could find in South America. So safety has come at least to the capital. And I think it's a key development because, you cannot really do business if you don't have a secure environment. And we got it, and this is why it's important to underline. I would like also to underline an important track of my own embassy. I mean, culture is always an important element of the foreign policy, and in our case, it's the best antidote to violence. And we have been very active, and I would like to tell you a few things because culture is a key to normalization. I will give you a small example. At the end of 2017, a Spanish group came here for the first time to the National Theatre, a flamenco group. They played over there. It had been 10 years since not one single international music group came to Baghdad. What showed that? I can say now to my companies, listen, even the flamenco go to Baghdad to play music. How come you cannot come over here? It was an important thing, and well, we have been very active in culture precisely because of that. We have just opened also an Instituto Cervantes. Let me tell you something. Very few people know that the Spanish department of the University of Baghdad, who has been working for 40 years, it was usually the most important one in the whole Middle East. Spanish classics were translated to the whole Arab world by Iraqi translators. And well, we have been trying to reinforce this department because there's a huge amount of young people who are learning Spanish. I want to also underline, for example, that Spain has been very vocal in the support to Iraq on the decision of the UNESCO to include the Babylon site into the World Heritage Sites. No? Very closely linked, and you're going to see that I'm moving outside. I'll come back to energy later on. It's what I would call football diplomacy or sports. Let me tell you something. Anybody when you come over here and they ask you, the first thing they ask you when a Spanish guy comes over here is whether you're from the Real Madrid or Barcelona. This is a global trend, but I can assure you, probably Iraqis, that this is a thing which is important. Due to that, let me tell you something. 3 Spanish football teams have opened football academies around here. We are training young Iraqi people. The first one was Espanyol, Getafe was the second one, and Real Madrid will sign next week with a group of Iraqi businessmen the opening of 4 Real Madrid academies in Iraq, which again will contribute to this process of normalization. Let me tell you something also, I would say human. You know that In 2016, no, 15, if I'm not wrong, a group of fans of Real Madrid were watching a quarterfinal game of Real Madrid. I think it was against Ajax in the town of Balad. And Daesh decided to attack them. They put a bomb over there, and quite a few people got killed, and a lot of them are injured. Well, we're sending back the victims, the sons and the families of the victims, some of the people who were there, to Madrid this week, precisely invited to Real Madrid, to try to give back what they left, what they lost in this heinous attack in Balad. I should recall you that when Real Madrid won that year the European Cup, the president of Real Madrid dedicated the cup precisely to the victims of Balad. Spain has been also very supportive, if we're talking about sports, with the Iraqi Olympic Committee. We are training most of the Iraqi members in Spain, and also we have been very, very active and vocal in the decision of FIFA to overcome the ban on international games in Iraq. Let me try to pass now to energy, because I think, I'm going to say something. I'm not an expert, but I'm going to say something that you will probably all agree. Renewable energies are the future, and here Spain has a very important role to play. It's a sector in which Spanish companies are leaders, and let me tell you something. Iraq has, 345 days of sun a year, just to talk about the sun. We all know that the transition, the energy transition will practically be ready into 2035, which is day after tomorrow. And I think Iraq needs to invest in renewable energies. I know, Minister, you're thinking about that, and well, we will be happy to be participating. Let me just tell you a few ideas. We were one of the first countries to implement the development of these sectors. Nowadays, we have in Spain more than 8,000 companies, from promoters, developers, engineers, EPC, OM, advisors, equipment, you name it. More than 85,000 direct employees in Spain and 128,000 indirect ones. Our Spanish companies have projects in 75 countries. We have more than 35,000 megawatts developed in different technologies, and our companies are leaders in different technologies as thermosolar with storage, wind offshore developments, PV trackers, inverters, hydroelectric dams, or biomass. As I said, for Spain, it's a strategic sector, and Spanish companies are among the largest electric operators. I would like to tell you a small example, and I will be finishing in 3 minutes, please, Levio here. With South Africa, Spain signed 10 years ago an agreement of technical cooperation with the government of South Africa, and Spanish consultants worked with the South African government to design an institutional framework, to elaborate documents of planification, to help organize the tenders. So altogether, this program was a real success, because nowadays, South Africa, in 10 years, they have 6,400 megawatts have been purchased with around 100 in IPP. 3,976 megawatts are already connected to the network and producing energy. And the economic impact in South Africa has been amazing. 14 billion of investments, 30% out of them were foreign investments, and 40,000 jobs have been created in South Africa in these 10 years. So renewables are obviously the future, and we'll be happy to help, Minister, when the time comes. I finish with something, I have been ambassador here for 2 years. Yasser, you said before that which experience we could offer to Iraq and the Spanish political. And I would like to tell you something that you all know, but I think that we should all recall and underline, because we turn to, politicians and diplomats also, sometimes we tend to look at short time. But Iraq has amazing long-term challenges, and we need to push the political class, all political forces, to try to get together and face them, to start to think about them. And let me just tell you a few of them. Population growth. This year the King of Spain came to a small visit. We came here, we saw the president, he saw our troops. 40 years ago, our kings came here also to Iraq in 1979. The population of Iraq in 1979 was 13 million inhabitants. Nowadays, it's 39. In 2030, it will be 50 million. And in 2050, it will be 80 million. So, this is something, of course, you cannot do anything. It's the fastest growing country in the Middle East, and this is something you have to take into consideration when you plan your future. Other Challenges, the youth bulge. 800,000 graduate from secondary school reach the labor market every year. Hyperurbanization. Back that in just 10 years will become a mega city of 12 million inhabitants. We start to have to think about the infrastructure. The city needs to start to think, how do we cope with this amount of people? House deficit. We have over 3 million households, a deficit of 3 million households. Public sector reform. I don't want to go on, but I will tell you, you know that in 2003, the core sector, I finished in 2 minutes, the core sector, public sector was 0.9 million. In 2019, I think we're close to 7 million, if not more than 7 million. The degree of employment in the public sector is unsustainable, and this is something we have to change. For not to talk about climate change and so on. Anyhow, why am I saying this? Because there is an urgent need to diversify the economy. It's precisely to overcome the oil curse, the so-called oil curse, and to do that, it's essential to develop the private sector. This is a key thing. I mean, is the private sector the one who's going to save Iraq, or the one who has to move forward and to create jobs for everybody? So that means to overcome the barriers to create new business. Why did I say that? Because, we had a Spanish experience in 1977, which was very interesting. 2 years after the death of Franco, 1 year before we did the constitution, all the political forces struck an agreement, the so-called Pactos de la Moncloa, essentially to consolidate the Spanish transition, which was essential to consolidate the Spanish transition. The objective was to design, in a moment of deep economic crisis due to the oil shock of 1973, a new economic policy to face unemployment, lower inflation, and recuperate the economy. All political forces agreed to leave the economic out of the political fight and to work towards a new plan which established the basis of a very modern economy that you could have today in Spain. To my humble opinion, and I know it's very complicated, but we have to talk about this, all political forces of this country should start to think together, how do you tackle these long-term challenges and develop a roadmap to face them? Iraqi political class will have to look beyond the immediate priorities and the tensions that divide them and try to find a way to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'll give the floor to Ambassador Yildiz, the Turkish ambassador to Baghdad. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, a big thank you to the organizers, and of course, I'm now nearing my third year, end of my third year here. When I was here for the first time, it was Minister Luay Hatip who was in charge, and this is his baby. And being a speaker now after 3 years is somewhat a distinction that I enjoy. So I thank you as the organizers, and I thank the minister as well, who's still, I see, taking care of the baby very closely, and we cherish this forum, definitely, very important. I will mostly speak about Turkey and Iraq relations, as enjoying a long shared history and culture, of course. Not only the history, but the stability, welfare, security, and future of these two countries are intertwined together. I happen to be the only ambassador, representative in this panel, which is a neighbor to Iraq as well. Although the title of the panel is Energy Diplomacy, matters regarding Iraq for Turks is not a matter of diplomacy per se, but these are matters of our own future, a future that we share, and inshallah we will build together. That's how we see Iraq and Turkey relations. Although the countries enjoy relations in the most multifaceted manner, for the sake of limiting my speech to the subject matter of the panel, I'll mainly focus on energy, maybe trade and transportation issues as well. To a certain extent, they are related with the energy issues. Of course, due to its geographical proximity, Iraq is a crucial resource country for Turkey. But when you imagine the role of Turkey in the transit routes, it's a crucial resource for European markets as well. Iraq enjoys such a unique position. And Turkey, as an increasingly industrialized country, which is almost 90% reliant on importing its oil and gas resources. For Turkey, it's an important Turkey is an important market for the Iraqis. And if Iraq does invest more in natural gas, Turkey will again be an important market for Iraqi natural gas. That's how we see it. Of course, we aim to further develop our existing cooperation in the field of energy because we have a strategic goal to diversify our suppliers and routes which carry energy to Turkey. And the recent developments regarding Iran, of course, which negatively affect Turkey and many others in the region, is a testament to the validity of this strategic goal of Turkey in terms of diversifying the routes and the sources for Turkish industry. And we believe that Iraq is not taking its fair share out of what it delivers to Turkey. Therefore, we believe that Iraq should take its fair share in the grand design of diversification of the energy supplies, not only for Turkey, but for the European markets as well. Turkey, as you know, is an important hub now in both axes, north-south and east and west. And being such an important hub for the transit of energy, and with enormous experience in this field in terms of pipelines, we are already and should be a much more of a strategic partner for Iraq in terms of distribution of its hydrocarbon resources to the world. Of course, in this context, I cannot stress more the importance of timely construction and effective operation of the new Kirkuk-Ceyhan oil pipeline. We are aware that Iraq is clear in its mind in terms of the importance of this pipeline. A new one, maybe on the same route that I just mentioned, connected this pipeline especially with a pipeline that will be coming from the south, from Basra, and reaching to the Iraqi border is already a very strategic project. And we are glad to acknowledge our Iraqi colleagues, counterparts, have a full understanding of the strategic nature of this pipeline. Of course, when a Turkish ambassador speaks, it won't be a surprise that the issues between Erbil and Baghdad is of crucial importance for us as well. The settlement of outstanding issues between Baghdad and Erbil can create new opportunities for Turkish-Iraqi relations, and especially in the area of energy cooperation. As you know, we Turks sometimes suffer, and not only us, but Turkish-Iraqi interests are hurt when Baghdad and Erbil cannot agree on certain issues. This is the case not only in terms of the transit of energy, but this is the case on a wide array of topics ranging from the customs to fighting against terrorism. So this is a crucial point in line in terms of Turkish-Iraqi relations. Of course, electricity is another important area for more cooperation between Turkey and Iraq. We are very much aware of the challenges of the Iraqi market. In this sense, Iraq needs an uninterrupted supply of electricity, not only for the climatic needs. I'm a Baghdadi, I'm somewhat an Iraqi as well, that I can see that the weather entails this well-running cooling systems. It's vital, but also access to sustainable electricity. Uninterrupted electricity is of utmost importance for the revival of the Iraqi economy. Recently, of course, our Minister of Energy and Natural Resources was here with Minister Louayatib in Baghdad, and the two ministers discussed about these matters, about how to strengthen Iraq's electricity reliability. They also exchanged views on relaunching the electricity trade between our countries. It's evident that the existing connectivity and connection capacity needs to be increased between Turkey and Iraq. We as Turkey made certain preparations to that effect, and if we can fill in the missing links in the electrical grid of Iraq, it will be able to provide more electricity and services to Iraq, and this will be in addition to what we already have in terms of oil. Of course, the final component in Turkey-Iraq energy relations is the domestic energy market. It's an important destination for the Turkish companies like Tüpraş, Enka, Limak. These are all well known to the Iraqi actors. Our interest in the energy market is not, of course, merely focused on reconstruction of the energy infrastructure, but we would like to make our contribution to the liberalization of the Iraqi energy market as well. Because we have a very recent and successful experience on this, where we can make a substantial contribution, especially with this experience in privatization of Turkey in the energy sector. Energy mix is another important area where Turkey can make, again, a meaningful contribution. Although it may not sound necessary for Iraq with huge hydrocarbon resources, every country needs some alternative and balance in its energy mix. In Iraq's case, of course, solar energy has a huge untapped potential, where again Turkey may bring its inputs there. We are up in the north, and we don't have that much of a sunshine up in the north, but despite this fact, I mean, now Turkey's average 6% per year is covered by solar energy. So this is an important ingredient for Iraq, and Turkey wants to be on board as well with this recent experience. And of course, finally, a couple of words for the need for reconstruction of Iraq in general and specifically in the energy infrastructure. As you know, Turkey came up with an important pledge during the Kuwait conference. We were the highest pledger with the $5 billion amount of credits, loans. We'd like this offer to be utilized within the framework, first, of Iraq's strategic priorities, of course, but secondly, for the benefit of our relations. Turkey is seriously ready to consider infrastructure projects to be financed with this loan, starting with the Kirkuk-Ceyhan oil pipeline as well. In addition to, of course, the infrastructure, of course, there is another important element of infrastructure which is very dear to energy. It is the transportation. Transportation network, a better transportation network can make an energy sector function better. Here I would like to mention a specific project, a road accompanied by railways especially, that will connect Basra to north to Peshawar, of course, will be an important contribution to alternative means of transportation for energy. Of course, when these two countries, Turkey and Iraq, get together, they don't simply connect two countries or two people, but two worlds that we are connecting, stretching from Asia to Europe. So as a neighbor, we'll continue investing in Iraq's future, which is no different than our own future as Turks. And we'll continue building our own future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Finally, I'm giving the floor to Ambassador Aubert, the French ambassador to Baghdad. Thank you.
Yeah, Minister, Excellencies, it is an honor for me to speak And above all, it is a challenge to speak after all my distinguished colleagues, and I'll do my best to keep your attention. To spare your time, I must say first that, well, I fully share the main ideas that have been expressed by my colleagues. But let me take this opportunity to convey some elements of the French vision concerning the issue of energy seen from where we are now, that means in Iraq. Well, as you may know, as you know for sure, major energy companies have had historical presence in Iraq for decades. You know that Total is born in Kirkuk in the 1920s, and that all other major energy companies have keep demonstrating a major interest in Iraq, the French branch of General Electric, Schneider, etc. All these companies are involved in the increase of Iraqi oil, gas, of electricity supply. They're committed in projects to address the most severe and immediate shortfall in electricity supply. That means to address the need of the population first. But they are also committed in longer-term projects through the improvement of network efficiency, grid extension, and so on. All these projects are setting a pathway towards a reliable and sustainable power system in the long term. And that's what we wish for Iraq. French companies are bringing a know-how which is worldwide recognized, and France is also financing to address the significant required investment in that sector. And I'd like to remind that there is, since last January, a financial facility of 1 billion euro to help develop projects in different sectors, among them, of course, energy. I would like to add also that renewable energy is for us an issue that has to be taken into account. All these companies have developed capabilities in this sector, and we are ready to explore, and I think we have to explore new ways of getting energy in this country. Even in France, as you know, we rely mainly on nuclear electricity, but there is an ongoing debate in our society about the future source of electricity, and renewable energy is now a concern for all of us and integrated by all our companies. And of course, we accompany private sectors, private companies through training programs. We have developed with the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research a very ambitious program of cooperation, scientific and for science and high technology, and in some other fields such as decentralization, exchanges of experience, etc. So what is important is the fact that France, we have a technical offer, we have a financial offer, we have an offer in terms of sustaining, developing institutional capabilities. There are two or three points I would like to convey to you concerning the specific situation of Iraq. First, the fact that stabilization efforts are still required in many areas, those areas that were occupied by Daesh, where the needs of the population are specifically strong, and there is an obvious link, an obvious relationship between stabilization, needs of population, and energy supply. Of course, what is required is security. Security is now present, even though some progress are still to be made in some areas of the countries with the help of the international coalition. But it entails also a political dimension, and probably the readiness to explore new ways to develop energy supply and distribution for the population. So this is why we commissioned our French Agency for Development, AFD, Agence Française de Développement, to work on that sector, which is linked also to environment, water, agriculture and some development, some other development aspects. But energy is at the key, because without energy, people cannot do anything and cannot even decently survive. So I wanted to stress, to underline this vital link between energy and stabilization. Stabilization and also in its humanitarian aspect. On the item of the role of France in supporting Iraqi diplomatic efforts in the region, of course, we support the balanced regional policy adopted by the government of Iraq. Iraq is a sovereign country and must not become a theater of regional conflict. We support fully its strategy to avoid tension, regional tension, or divisions that could be imported from outside the country. And of course, we support this idea of creating and promoting economic interaction with all the neighbors. And energy, of course, is a part of that. And energy, of course, for Iraq is a matter of sovereignty. So this is the way we see it. The way we want to accompany Iraq is also to help it recovering its full sovereignty on that sector. As you know, France is working hard to de-escalate the situation in the region. Our president, together with our European partners, is fully committed to promote regional security, and we are talking to everybody, including the United States, Iran, the Gulf states, Russia and Israel, to diffuse regional tensions. So again, I want to stress that point. We fully support this balanced regional policy initiated by Iraq over the last 2 years and now deepened by the government. Concerning the infrastructure projects and how to replicate them in Iraq, this is something, of course, we have in mind, and that is essential. French companies have a worldwide experience in that field. I can remind the ongoing construction of the subway in Riyadh, 6 tracks, more than 180 kilometer lanes, more than 80 stations, which can be an example of what we can do in this country. This Asamra water treatment plant, which is the biggest in Jordan, or the photovoltaic power plant in Cestas in France. These are experiments that can inspire us in our way to cooperate and to find new ways, to explore new ways to develop energy supply in Iraq. Diplomacy, of course, is essential, is even more essential that we are all facing new and common challenges, and I wanted to talk about the challenge of climate. Iraq is highly concerned by climate change. It's one of the most climate vulnerable countries and listed as such. It's a water-stressed region. It is challenged by interconnected problems, so in political, economic, environmental, and security that could be worsened by climate change if nothing is done to address the issue seriously. And the country and the population have already experienced the effects of climate change. So we have projects in that domain. First, we consider that we should keep mobilized at international and diplomatic level, but also on the field, and as I said it earlier, the issue of energy is closely linked to that of environment protection, water, and this is what we are doing through the commitment of the French Agency for Development, which will be back very soon from this year in Iraq to foster development projects. So we consider that the issue of energy, and this is what seems most important, means also, I mean, it is a strong element of social cohesion, of national cohesion. It is a component also, essential component of regional and international stability, and it should be addressed as such. It's not only a matter of a technical matter. It's not only, although it is very important to provide the conditions to companies to work well. This is essential, and I fully agree with what has been said by my colleagues. But it's also it's part of what should be, I think, we think, a more holistic approach. And above all, what we need certainly is a common vision that we have to develop together, and that should encompass all aspects: security, environment protection, private sector development, infrastructure development, improving institutional capacities, security, and so on. So these are the elements that would inspire the way we are working in Iraq in that sector. And again, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Given that this session will end in 15 minutes, I would like to utilize the time and open up the floor early for questions from the audience. So if anybody has a question, you may raise your hand, please. Okay, in that case, I will... there is somebody, okay. Ambassador Bluka, of course. If we can pass a mic to Ambassador Ramon, that would be very nice. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the very interesting ideas that have been shared. But there is something that I find that maybe we could also try to use all this expertise here present to look on the future and the vision. And I was thinking of the words of President Barham Saleh when he inaugurated the last Soleimania Forum, and he was basically reflecting on how the European Union was born after decades of war out of this cooperation on steel and coal. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, can we fix the audio?
Hello? Yeah. Can energy become the foundation of regional integration? I mean, is it realistic to think that Iraq could be the hub of a process of regional economic cooperation, as the title of this conference proclaims, based on infrastructure and energy exchanges? Or is this too much of a dream to think that so many failed political projects, so many failed regional integration projects actually do not forebode well for such an initiative? But maybe those projects have been based on political basis and not so much on real economic realities.
Thank you, Ambassador Bluka. We have a question from Maya Jbaili from AFP, sorry, too.
Hi, hello. Thanks so much to all the ambassadors. I have a question first for Ambassador Yildiz. I didn't hear you talk about water, which I was a bit surprised by, and I'd be interested to hear a bit more about where the negotiations stand right now between Iraq and Turkey on water sharing and what you see as the biggest obstacles to progress there. And Ambassador Tuller, I would like to ask you about sanctions waivers. So there's a few weeks left until the next round of waivers for Iraq to import energy from Iran are set to end. Will there be a renewal, and is this the new normal? Is it foreseeable that Iraq will have to just kind of wait every 3 months to get new sanctions waivers for the next 2-3 years until it actually reaches energy independence? Thank you.
Thank you, Mai. I'm also giving the floor to His Excellency Minister Khatib.
Thank you, Yasser. This whole idea about energy diplomacy, it goes hand in hand with the economic prosperity and peace. When we talk about energy cooperation and energy diplomacy, one need to look into what Iraq has achieved this year, for example, when it comes to For example, going into deep negotiation with neighboring countries, such as the GCC, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia in specific, Jordan, and now Turkey. And the interconnectivity is going to be very much surrounding Iraq with all 6 neighbors. Not only to diversify source of energy, but to turn Iraq into a truly energy hub. And this requires the right politics to be in place. And for the international community to understand this, it's about time for this part of the world, the Middle East, to enjoy a stability, not only to sustain regional economies, but to sustain global economies, given the fact that this part of the region is a key player when it comes to oil and gas supply and beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khatib, for your comments. So just going back through some of the questions here. So one thing that has been mentioned throughout this session was regional integration. Ambassador Bluka came to us with a question with regards to, is this another failed project of regional integration? There has been many there before. So if any of our distinguished panelists want to pick up on that question. We'll go for Ambassador Tula.
Well, I'll take that, and then of course also there was the question about the waivers on electricity imports from Iran. Well, I would say from the United States perspective, the U.S.-Iraqi relationship is inherently important because of what Iraq represents in terms of the potential it has to serve as a stabilizing force in the Middle East. Conversely, of course, if things go badly here, the potential for that to have an impact far beyond the borders of Iraq is quite great. And that isn't just on the political and security side, but I think on the economic side as well. This is an economy of $226 billion a year, GDP, a growing population that's been mentioned. It sits at the nexus of trade across major countries in the region, and of course, a region where hydrocarbons and energy is extremely important. And yet Iraq, in some respects, has the greatest potential to move towards a more diversified economy and to develop a model for greater prosperity that, again, because of the impact Iraq could have in the Middle East, is quite important. The question on the sanctions, of course, the United States has now granted successive waivers specifically for the purchase of electricity imports from Iran. There are no waivers for the purchase of Iranian gas. The current waiver expires in mid-October. Waivers can be granted for different periods of time, so I can't really say whether it would be renewed for the same period of time, extended or not renewed. That decision relies entirely with the Secretary of State. However, our approaches, of course, is that it's in Iraq's own interest to take concrete steps towards energy independence and to use its own resources, which are sufficient for its needs. This would save Iraq money, reduce its reliance on the Iranian electricity and gas imports, and so it's in Iraq's own interest to take steps in that regard. I can't comment any further because I simply don't know what the Secretary of State's decision will be, but of course we will continue to encourage Iraq to take steps towards greater energy independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Should we move to Ambassador Fatah Yildiz on the water issue? Just before that, Ambassador Fatah Yildiz, I just wanted to put a comment there. In the last few months, and this is a report that Iraq Energy Institute has worked on, we have seen progress in terms of the response between Ankara and Baghdad on water issues. So recently we have put a report where we dated everything, all the major milestones, and we have seen that with good diplomacy, with good relationship developing between both capitals, that is reflective positively on the water issue. But of course, I leave the answer to you, sir.
Well, thank you. First, with the regional aspect, of course, I cannot miss that part as well. As a regional country, I had in my presentation those clues of huge projects that may serve as huge prospects for the region. I mean, Kerkük-Ceyhan is just part and parcel of this large vision, of course, but the transportation routes or the railways that are stretching from Basra and to the border with Turkey will, in fact, in addition to that interconnectivity that Minister was highlighting in terms of maybe electricity, but we need that connectivity almost in every sphere of energy among the regional countries. So we believe in this as a regional actor, because the union that we would like to join someday, as you know, started with the economic integration once, and the Europeans, after two major wars, believed in this, and they were able to push this. So why not to make this happen for Middle East? So Bruno, we'll continue working on that here. Regarding water, yes, water issue is a major, let's say, agenda item in terms of our relations. As you highlighted, during the last couple of years, we have come a long way in terms of turning a water issue into a matter of not dispute, but matter of mostly of cooperation. That's what we did. And in response to what our friend from AFP asked is, rather than calling it as a negotiation, but it's let's say called talks between Iraq and Turkey, and the talks recently somewhat achieved a much more structured form with the appointment by President Erdogan, special envoy for the water issues of Iraq. Of course, there are differing visions and perspectives, perceptions about the existing problem at hand. The idea behind the talks is, of course, to somewhat harmonize those two differing views, meaning the problem of water here is not simply a problem of the flow of water that's coming in to Iraq, but after it comes in, how it is managed is an important part of the matter as well. So with that, a final word, the special envoy was here early August, and we were able to deliver to the Iraqi side an action plan on concrete matters, on how Turkey can contribute to the water resources management in Iraq, including some projects that may be financed through the $5 billion that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to thank all the ambassadors present at this panel. Also, I would like to apologize that we do not have enough time to have a longer Q&A. But by the end of this panel, I would like to invite Mr. Adnan Janabi, the Vice Chairman of the Iraq Energy Institute, to present a number of tokens of appreciation and souvenirs to the ambassadors for their presence today here. Thank you very much. Ambassador Jonathan Wilkes, the UK Ambassador to Iraq. Ambassador Hansi Escobar, Spanish Ambassador to Iraq. And of course, Ambassadors Fatih Yildiz and Bruno Aubert of the Turkish and French Republics. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.